Thank you very much. Wow, yes, packed room. So, what we're going to be covering today is the problem that I came across, why I decided to try and inject some honesty. But one thing I would just like to say is that please ask questions all the way through. I always think it's much better to ask the question when everyone has the context of whatever you're thinking about at the time. So yes, we're going to go through the problem, the background, the big idea, the plan and the process, and then a bit of a conclusion at the end. So the backstory. So the development manager leaves in a couple of weeks and there's no plan to replace them. The development team is considered to be the limiting factor for the company's success. So it's their fault, basically. You know how it is. I've been given 6 months and 1 day a week to make the team more productive, to save the day. And business as usual is going to carry on, and there's going to be loads of new projects, no extra people. The only training will be what I can deliver in that 1 day a week. Yeah, so it's an interesting challenge. So I had some background already, so I knew some things about the organisation before I rocked up for this particular engagement. So some of the projects, most of the projects had some degree of client research. It's good. Most of the projects had business sponsors. That was good. Mock-ups and prototypes were beginning to be being used. That was good. And priorities were being set by the business, so there was some high-level things going on from there. Some not so good things. So some projects really didn't get any kind of return on investment, investigation being done first, bit of a sort of finger in the air job, gut feel, kind of seat of your pants kind of situations. Some things were being started without really the business knowing really what was going on in development as well. So yeah, fun things there. Never a retrospective. It was always straight on to the next thing. So the idea of a sprint retrospective completely nowhere near, but not even project retrospectives were happening. Automated testing was very limited. Some projects actually got canned before they got released because the business kind of went on to the next shiny thing before the thing was finished. Sometimes that was down to the fact that the development team had taken an awfully long time over something. One project I know took 9 months and then got canned before seeing the light of day, and that was quite a lot of work thrown away, really. Some completed work wasn't getting shipped, so the team was being really busy, but for some reason things just never quite had got over the line and out the door and getting into being useful and making money. The business had kind of lost confidence in deadlines. They'd kind of lost that faith that things were going to get done when they needed them. And communication had kind of broken down. It was kind of getting into that contract negotiation, very formal, because the developers were saying that the reason why they couldn't get stuff done was people kept on interrupting them, and because things weren't kind of very clear and all of that. So it had kind of degenerated, really, in my mind, into a kind of them and us, and it had got a very formal, really. And the development team were kind of piggy in the middle. They kind of had various teams, various business functions throwing stuff into them, and they were the ones that kind of were left to sort of work out the priorities, even though the high level that was there, but the actual day-to-day, what needed to be done when, really didn't, they had to do that, and they got constantly harassed by it. So then the context. So this business is under significant pressure. They've got some really big players that have moved into their market and really want to take their their lead, really. They're quite significant in their marketplace, but they're quite a small player in comparison to people who are moving in. So they've got some pretty big people to worry about. Because of this kind of them and us had occurred, really, both development and business were kind of wanting to have things in place, have processes in place to kind of control the other. So rather than trying to be fluffy and agile and everyone moving together, it had kind of very much changed to being a sort of command and control and blame culture. And both sides really kind of didn't feel loved and understood and all of those kind of things. They really felt that they were kind of on their own, and the other part of the process really didn't really understand them. And no one was happy. No one was happy with what was going on, really. And other background, they had quite a formal structure. So there were developers who didn't do testing. The prospect of testing was just, it was for them, those testers over there, and the idea of developers getting involved in that was just not happening. And it was the first job for the majority of the team as well. So they're quite an inexperienced team in the respect that they hadn't worked anywhere else. They had nothing else to compare their working life with. I mean, some of them have been there for nearly a decade, but actually this is all they'd ever known. So the company had grown. It has grown quite significantly over that time. So it's gone from sort of a few people up to a size of 60 odd. But from that, a lot of things were homegrown, and it was just the way things were always done. So the goal, my goal from being there, was very much to break down the barriers, to stop the them and us. The idea was that we needed to start working together. I really wanted the business to control what was going to get done and by when. But I wanted a balance here. I didn't want it to be command and control. Exactly how that was going to get done, technologies, all of that kind of stuff, very much feel that was down to the developers. They get told what needs to happen for the business to function, but actually it's their problem and their experience that's going to be used to work out how that happens. But really, the big thing for me was to create transparency for people to understand the needs in both directions. So, the idea, honesty, actually people being genuinely honest with one another about what was going on, the good, the bad, and the context they find themselves in. And the definition. So free of deceit, which I really, really like, truthful and sincere. So actually, the idea was that there wasn't going to be hidden agendas. Everyone was going to be really transparent about why they wanted to do something, what was the purpose behind it. So just thinking back, honesty, what do we lose when we aren't open and honest? Well, trust. What do you think about someone when someone's lied to you? You don't trust them. You don't really warm to them. You don't really want to be working with them because you just don't know what's true and what's not. I see some interesting knowing looks going on. Unity. So when trust breaks down, actually you're no longer going to be functioning as a good team. So this is going to be a really big thing that you're not going to be pulling together. And the thing for me that really, I think, helps sell this to the business is information. If you don't really know what's going on, you don't have the information to make good decisions. We've all seen companies out there slip deadlines, and I'm sure in those situations, people have been going, yeah, we'll make the deadline, no, we're not going to make the deadline. And actually, those kind of things, very, very close to when you're supposed to have shipped, obviously people really, really lose face. And a lot of things change in that time at the end. Testing potentially gets ditched, all sorts of things, compromises get made, and the business didn't have the opportunity to make those decisions when things were going wrong. And I think this is the big pitch for me. This is the way in which I sold it. That without the information, the business can't know what's going on. But why aren't we? Why aren't we honest? Well, protection. People are frightened. People have interests. They want their job, they want the promotion, they want all of these things. And actually, sometimes it feels like not being honest about what has happened feels like a sensible thing to do because you're protecting your career. And also potentially your image. You have this persona you are projecting to people, and actually admitting to when things aren't going as well as you'd hoped. Potentially that's going to knock that image. Sometimes it's buying time. Sometimes you really, really believe it's all going to be all right in the end. That actually, even though currently you're running weeks behind, that somehow you're going to pull it back. You know, you're going to do extra hours and all that kind of stuff. And the business don't really need to know. You have managed to convince yourself that although this has never worked in the past, this time it will. Avoid negatives is kind of the same kind of thing as protection, but actually you're just trying to avoid those things. You're trying to avoid those awkward conversations, that rejection, that possibility of missing out in some way. Not wanting to disappoint others. You know, it's one of those things you really want to do a good job, and you just don't want to, you don't want to disappoint people. And sometimes we just convince ourselves of a different truth, that actually it is okay, or this hasn't really happened, or it isn't as bad as we thought, and all that. And we kind of lie to ourselves that actually it's all good. And sometimes you know that people don't want to know, and actually you just don't tell them because you've tried to tell them in the past and they've not been interested. Or you don't think they want to know, so you convince yourselves that they don't want to hear the truth. And obviously sometimes you have good reason for that, and sometimes it's just one of those things where you've convinced yourself that they're not interested. Now, one of the biggest situations, I've been in situations where I really didn't want to tell the truth. I was working one weekend. I work in a support department, and we were doing these wonderful upgrades over the weekend. And come 3:30 in the morning on Monday morning, having worked huge hours over the weekend, I naively explained to someone how to do a really, really complicated command on how to restore stuff. Sadly, I didn't bother asking them what they were going to do with this complicated command. They managed to restore an operating system over the top of a working operating system, just a few hours before everybody was about to come in. And I remember distinctly both of us very sheepishly walking up to the boss going, the whole weekend work we've just been doing? Yeah, we've just killed it. And it's kind of like, his response was, well, better fix it quickly then, hadn't you? No. Yeah, I left at 11:30 in the morning, so I'm not quite sure. I think I turned up 10 the previous day, or 9:30. But yeah. But if we had just not told him, what would have happened? As I say, it's one of those things that it's very easy to kind of, it was jelly legs walking up to him. It really was, because he wasn't a nice person. He wasn't a kind, fluffy manager. He was the sort of person that didn't really, well, it turned out he was autistic, and the feelings really weren't his thing. So I managed to also destroy an email server once as well. I didn't like that either. Anyway, so step one, the people. So with all teams, as I say, I was brought in to fix the development team, but I don't think that's a tenable position. Basically, what needed to happen is the whole organisation had to change. So with all of the teams, I went through and discussed the pain points. So obviously you saw I had some context, but I went through with all of the teams, all of the senior managers, and with everybody who looked like they had any kind of interaction with the development team, I went through and talked to them. I established that there was discontent. And most of all, I established there was a desire to change. And basically, from that, that was my remit, if you like. Without that, it would have been a hiding to nothing. Without real desire, it was one of those things that everybody hated. As I said before, no one liked the status quo. We had to change. So I did a bit more digging when I was there. So the whole thing about development was they had to be 100% busy. The previous dev manager had been left in no doubt whatsoever. Anyone sat there doing apparently nothing that was going to be shipped code was wrong. So they had to be 100% busy. And we've all seen that wonderful hockey stick of, when you have utilization of 100%, lobbing anything in is bad. So no time was spent on professional development. As I say, some of these guys had been there for a decade-ish, but they'd never actually had any time. So all the stuff they'd kind of learned 10 years ago, that's kind of the way they were still working. They very much were in the sausage machine, get things moving, get it out the door. And there was a little bit of mentoring, but it was shockingly bad. The people being brought in were going, these new guys, they're rubbish. It's kind of like, how much time have you spent with them? Not a lot. So they just sat there looking at code, trying to work out how to do it. No real context. Just get on with it. And then they were kind of wondering why these poor people weren't able to be as productive as the people who'd been there for years, who'd written the thing in the first place. There was a bit of horse trading, really. There was that situation where the dev manager, he liked you or you didn't. And if he liked you, you got your stuff done a little bit quicker or all that kind of stuff. And if you were unkind or unreasonable, then potentially some of your stuff just slipped a bit. And so business priorities potentially weren't the whole motivation for what was getting done and what wasn't. In the real world, basically, there were regression errors. So people were just lobbing stuff, and for some reason, mergers, all that kind of stuff, all of those horrible, painful situations, that was happening. And as I say, in this day and age, it really shouldn't be. Again, rework. So what the business thought, what the developers thought, and what the testers thought were different. So just losing, so much cycles in that kind of situation where it's kind of like, well, it's exactly what I thought it was supposed to do. It's like, well, that's not what we wanted. Testing was a bottleneck. So as I'd mentioned, 4 to 1, and the developers just weren't interested in helping. So basically they were hammering code at these guys. They actually had some code that was 3 years old. 3 years sat there waiting to have some time in testing. Yeah, amazing. And Skunkworks projects. So these guys were so busy, and the testers were kind of sat there, they kind of were storming. I can get on with some stuff that I think would be really, really cool. And it will really help the business. Definitely want to do that. Didn't bother asking the business what they wanted. And one of the amazing things is when I arrived was, actually that was my other slide, yes, years old code, not shit. But one of the amazing things when I arrived, there was a major support issue. And the developers went, we wrote a system to sort this, never got into production. How long ago did you do that? Oh, about 3 years ago. It's like, excellent. Did the business want it? Oh, well, we showed it to them and they didn't really understand what it was supposed to do. But actually, if they had had the sponsors, I'm sure it would have gone through, because it was an absolute carnage that day when I was there, because support was just overwhelmed because of this issue that they had thought of was going to happen one day and had coded something to sort it, but never actually got it shipped. Scary. So, the business. Yeah, so on the day-to-day, the business weren't being involved. The business, no thought to non-functional requirements. The assumption is it will be 100% reliable, have 100% uptime, and have zero latency. Obviously, that is implicit in everything we ask. You will, of course, do that all the time. And when that wasn't the case, purple managers jumping up and down, and the idea that the fact they asked for it to be out of the door really, really quickly was complete. Who knows these things? Certain managers, as I say, there was some horse trading on some respect, but also there were some managers that were big and scary, and they managed to really give the development team a bit of a kicking, so they managed to get their stuff leapfrogged, again, without the whole business being aware that those sorts of things were happening. And the business giving arbitrary dates. So we mentioned before that deadlines were being missed and all that kind of stuff. So they kind of went, right, you need to work your socks off to make this deadline. And amazingly, they made that deadline. And then the developers see that nothing happens because the marketing hadn't been lined up and all of those sorts of things, because they didn't really believe it was going to happen. Properly impress the developers at that when you work weekends and all that kind of stuff to hit a date. So yeah, not fun. And they very much had a belief that the developers really didn't care about the business and the deadlines that they had. Also, because they'd missed some deadlines, they'd shipped stuff out to third parties. The third parties had been given a fixed price quote. The third parties had delivered exactly what was in the spec, not really what was really wanted. And then all of this stuff was then dumped back on the development team in languages they didn't really like, technologies they weren't familiar with, and all of that kind of stuff. So again, the developers really, really chuffed about that. So, the idea. Development, to be honest about what's happening, what are they really doing, what's going on. Well, they don't know. So, again, this was one of these things, it's kind of like, well, the business really won't understand. Well, you really need to be able to explain it. If you can't explain it to them, then they're not going to understand. And it's like, well, they just won't, they're just not techie. It's like, well, if you tell them that if it goes down, it's going to be 3 weeks before you can get it back, they will understand that. It's really, really simple. And it's kind of like, start thinking about life from their perspective. What do they care about? So, and also when things are going wrong. Really, really need to know when things are going wrong. Even if it's only gone wrong today, and today has been a bad day, they need to know. They may not care because they may think it's fine, but actually be really honest about everything as soon as it goes wrong. And for the business to be honest about what's just a punt, and what's going to get definitely value to the business. There was a few pet projects that were created. As I say, there were no return on investment stuff where people kind of went, I don't know if it'll work or whatever. But the developers really didn't know what was cast iron, this is going to make us money. This is create something with a happy path that we can show to people, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit flaky. They weren't being given that kind of understanding because the business weren't bothering to tell them that. It was just everything from their perspective was the same level, which was kind of get it through, make sure it looks all right, and there wasn't this focus on this non-functional side of it. It's kind of, this has got to be really rock solid, or this has just got to be all right for a few customers. And really be honest about the deadlines, so everybody is going to be aware of this. And for both sides to actually be prepared to give. And that meant potentially a bit of overtiming work sometimes, and also potentially some other projects having to be put on a back burner. The actual company was going to have to make some decisions rather than the development team making the decisions and then getting kicked for it. So the plan. Change everything. Kind of thought, well, no one liked anything anyway, so let's just change absolutely everything. And I must confess, I was just stunned in these meetings, having been told by the previous manager, really, really nice guy, but stunned at these guys will never change. They're really, really not interested in change at all. I just kept on going sort of, what's the problem? Explain the problem. How do you fancy changing that? Yes, let's change it. Okay, how about this idea? Awesome, we'll try that idea. So, some of the ideas. all of the business was to be able to request work. So the tech team, the development teams themselves were requesting pieces of work. So the non-functional stuff, everything was going into a big bucket, if you like. But the business was going to set all of the priorities, and they had to take responsibility for non-functional stuff. So they had to take responsibility for the backups aren't working properly, the fact that new features to this particular system are going to take a long time until you solve this. All of these things were then going to be given to the business, and they had to make the decision. And yeah, they went, yeah, okay, let's go for that, fine. I'm not a great fan of Scrum. They had Scrum before, kind of. So I went Kanban. And they kind of went, yeah, we never tried that before. Yeah, okay, let's go for that. So very, very strict with Linux, very strict. Amazingly strict to the point where people are going, you mean I can't do anything now? It's like, no, you can't. It's like, what should you do now then? Look around. Oh, they're the people that are holding me up. Until they've got their thing finished, I can't do anything. Spot on. Well spotted. That's exactly what you want to help. And then, funnily enough, they were helping the testers. All of these sorts of things that they weren't doing before. They weren't mentoring people. They weren't helping the testers. All of these things, suddenly, it's kind of like, oh, I can't do anything. Can I read stuff? It's like, well, if there's nothing else you can do, nobody else wants your help. Have you asked everybody? No. It's like, well, how? Well, when you've asked everyone and they've all said no, they don't need help, then you can start looking at stuff. Okay. Well, the testers needed some help. Storming. And funnily enough, the testers then suddenly started being able to sort of think about automation of stuff, because the developers were thinking, oh, I wonder how we can automate this and all of that kind of stuff. So, yes. Great. Mock-ups agreed, but I mean, we went for some mock-up tool Balsamic, and sometimes the people were doing things like just really, really cheap and cheerful websites, you know, kind of just really, really naff, doesn't save anything, but actually creating functional prototypes that the business went yes, the testers went yes, and the development, okay, that's what you want. So nobody was under any false impression about what was going to happen. And these things actually also got put in front of clients as well. So actually nothing got started. And it was a very, very cute little system in that the story cards, there was a little star that the tester would put on the story card going, I have looked at this and I am happy. And I do remember distinctly seeing one of the developers putting a star on something themselves, and the tester storming across the room going, that wasn't me. And it's like, scribble out. It's like, but it was fine. It's like, no. It was his control, or the testing team's control. They did it, and that actually, yeah, that's worked really, really well. So the developers to control scheduling. This is the idea that actually that they've been told by the business when stuff needs to get done, and they're going to be treated like grown-ups. So if they're going to finish something off first, that's fine. That's their choice. They know when it's got to get done by. And time set aside for process improvement and professional development. So if we want these guys to be more effective, they've got to actually be able to change. So the implementation, what we actually tried to do. I'm amazed actually so far no one's asked any questions. Go on, go for it. That's a very good question. So I didn't set aside any specific amount of time. What I expected to happen was basically that people would start looking at a particular task and go, I could do this better, and therefore I will take longer over it. And in that time, the person controlling the Kanban board and all that kind of stuff would go, okay, we will build that into this particular part of the project. We will allow this to take longer than it did last time. And in other situations as well, basically, this person is balked, no one's interested in them helping. That's the time. That was the aspiration. I'll come on to what happened a bit later, but that was the aspiration. Yes. The general manager. For me, I was. I mean, it's a company of 60, so actually it wasn't a big deal to get there. But also, as I said, the company's been around for quite a long time, but it was actually a reasonably new general manager had come in, and actually he'd worked in big organisations where Agile was part of the way of doing things, and he'd been in for a while, but actually he hadn't messed around. You know, there was a development manager there already. He wasn't going to start kicking over stuff. He had an awful lot to do because he had just been brought in and he was dealing with the people who reported to him directly. So I basically turned up and went, I want to change everything. And he went, go for it, pal. So I had very, very good buy-in with a reasonably, how can I put it? I was promising quite a lot for a bang for the buck, if you like. What I was saying that we would achieve from this. So it wasn't just a kind of go for it. It was we'll go for it, but you do need to deliver.
How did you manage the business time expectations, developers, estimation and so on?
Good. This is just what I'm going on to now. So basically everything put into a pipeline. Whenever it went into the pipeline, every week, everything that goes into the pipeline, they t-shirt sized it. Really, you're not allowed to spend more than a minute deciding how big this thing's going to take. That's the whole backlog. You know, it is either going to be, this is really complicated and it hits lots of systems. This is difficult, but it's well confined, and this is an absolute doddle. So it's basically that. That is the only level that we were looking at. But that meant that then there was this fortnightly business meeting that they got to see this list, and basically from that they just got to pick. All they did is they saw the new stuff come in. They had a list already, and they basically went, this manages to jump in, or no, it doesn't. And it really quick meeting in that respect to make those decisions. But the really good thing was that actually the development team wasn't even there. As it was very much, they are no longer the custodians of this. It was very much, we've lobbed it in. This business meeting was, I think, quite heated at certain times, but actually it completely de-stressed the development team from those decisions. So it was a really good move from their perspective. They absolutely loved it.
The business accepted the development
Yeah, basically it was t-shirt size to work out what order things should go in. It wasn't, it's going to take a day, a week, or whatever. It was for the business to kind of go, this is really important, but it's too big for us to handle now. This is really important. Oh, it's not that bad. Let's have that one before this other one that is probably more important, but we know it's smaller. So really lightweight, simple side of things. So, and actually, I was very much trying to get them away from doing estimates, because my personal opinion is, you know, your estimate's wrong. You know, if your estimate is right, you've already done it and you've just lied because you've done the work, you've worked out how long it was, and then you present the estimate. That's the only way your estimate's ever right. And I have done that in a few situations, but that's another story.
Was somebody that also responsible for the value associated with each piece of work as well? So if you know how big it is,
yep,
it might be really big,
yep,
but not very valuable or really valuable, which would.
Yeah. So basically, those business meetings, tech debt stuff went into those, and the lead dev presented individually to one of the people going into that meeting, going, this is really important for this reason, but I'm not even going to go into the meeting. If there was more background required, he did occasionally get pulled in to kind of go, we need to understand why you think this is really, really important. And it was, I mean, as I say, some really, really strong characters. And I'm sure there was some shoutiness happening in certain situations, because they're some very strong characters. But the focus of their irritation completely switched from being towards the development team to them as a group having to come up with the business's priorities. So some of the issues still come out from that for the development team, but as I say, this was something that was very key.
So were you using any mechanisms at all to forecast any likely completion
Nope. No, it was very much, we have something that shifts stuff through, this is the important thing, and they're going to get it done as fast as possible. But on top of that, there was the business imperatives, if you like, which is, we need this done by this date because the marketing is going to happen then. And the development team going, okay, that's fine, we'll do that, but these other things that we've got on at the moment are going to slip. It's basically, we promise to get one thing out the door on the day you promise, the day you've told us to, and everything else we will do best efforts. And it basically, they got to say, line in the sand, this thing has to be done now, and everything else was best efforts. And after that one had been done, then they got to tell them another thing that had to be done, line in the sand. And it really, really kind of, as I say, I just think spending a lot of time guessing how long things are going to take is just guesswork, and stuff always comes out of the woodwork. And this is my kind of rather pragmatic approach to it. It's kind of like, you get to pick one thing and that's it. It's kind of like, and you guys get to argue about it, and the developers don't get to get beaten up about it. So from this, the developers actually started testing, as I mentioned, which was good. We did start doing some project level retrospectives with the business person in there as well. So actually, we shipped this, how did it go? And actually, the business perspective of how did it go was actually the most important thing. So you may think it went wonderfully, but actually it fell on its face, or you may think it was awful, but actually the business thinks it's amazing, because actually you hit that deadline and everyone's happy. And it's kind of like, well, it's rubbish code. It's kind of like, yes, but you hit the deadline, and actually at the moment it's surviving. So all good. And actually that kind of level, really, I suppose.
How often do you ship?
Sorry?
How often do you ship?
Well, the project retrospectives were actually very big, sort of whole product being created. So, I mean, these guys were shipping before I arrived, kind of once every 8 weeks. Now they're doing every 3 weeks. They are shipping in an environment which is, they're not doing a fluffy website. They're having to deploy to thousands of machines that are being used. So that they're not in a nice fluffy A/B test kind of, all that kind of stuff. They're dealing with OS upgrades and all sorts they're having to do. It's a Linux environment where they.
So you're having a retrospective every 3 weeks?
No, sadly not. It was only kind of, we have created this wonderful brand new shiny thing. The business is sufficiently important to get involved with the retrospective. So that's one of the things I haven't managed to get in. I'll mention it a bit later, but yeah, it's the retrospective at the level of the shiny thing from the business that we did manage to get in.
That retrospective just focusing on the delivery of the product out now, was it like the project would say, right, you're going to do this and it will return an ROI of X? Is that also at that point presented back to the developers to go, guys, I know you think that code is a bit of a hack or whatever, but business perspective, actually, we wanted this level of ROI and you did 100%.
They haven't got good enough metrics for that. What they were able to do is go, we need to do this, this is the customer feedback, and all of that kind of stuff. So they got some of the kind of softer perspectives on that. Then they haven't kind of got the I mean, compare the market where you kind of go, okay, we've made this change and actually we can see sadly they're not in that kind of not in that boat. But the developers were for the first time getting you hit this deadline and this is the difference it's made, which was good.
How did you get developers that weren't interested in testing to a position where they now realise that that was a good idea? I get the Kanban and the WIP limits and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, but was there any kind of EDD type stuff going on about collaborating around the piece of work and all having that sense of ownership? Do you encourage any of that?
I did encourage that kind of thing. I mean, I think that was basically the beginning of all this, which is your life's really horrible right now. And your life's really horrible right now because the business don't trust you. And actually, if you start focusing on the done is not it's off your desk. Done is it's in a site making us money. And actually, that mindset I was really, really hammering home. So that was the change, and I wouldn't say that all of them kind of went, yay, let's go for it. I think some of them were pretty much shuffling sideways, but actually there was far more of a kind of, yeah, we need to do this. We accept this as an issue. And I think it was actually just asking the awkward questions of kind of going, so how much of your code has actually been shipped? And they had about 3 figures worth of separate code complete, ready to deploy stuff that hadn't gone through testing. And as I say, some of it was up to 3 years old. And they kind of just went, pennies dropped. Actually, if we're just shipping stuff and it's just hitting this brick wall, we've got to stop that. So actually, it was that kind of, what you're telling me is we could have had 3 less people in this department. Well, actually, I kind of went, at the moment, you've lost, it's well over a man-year's worth of work that's not been shipped. So we could get rid of one of you and nobody'd notice. I didn't say this to the business, but I did say it to them. And it's kind of like, that's got to change. And I think that kind of, I mean, I'm not a very polite. Yeah, I think it may have been. It's kind of like, you're genuinely not doing anything. One of you here is genuinely not doing anything of any value because it's not getting shipped. That is what value is. Value isn't you've done it. Value isn't not getting. The thing was that I don't know whether it happened because I wasn't there to see it, but I got the impression it's like sort of I get shouted at if I've not finished coding. And I don't get shouted at if I can go, I've finished it, he's with him now. And I kind of got that, that's kind of the feel I got for, that's the way it was.
Oh, another metaphor I like using, similar sort of thing is, if I try and put it in my head and say, right, if business turns around to me and says, right, you're not getting paid until your work's out, would that all of a sudden change my attitude towards how I'm pushing things or promoting things or stuff like that?
Yeah. Very much. Yeah, it's kind of like, show me the value in this code that you've written. And it's kind of like, there's none because it's not been shipped. And the business isn't getting any value from it. So again, exactly as you say, why should you get paid for it if it's not been done? And I think that, as I say, I'm a bit cheeky in those kind of meetings. And as I say, after 6 months, I'm gone anyway. So, I mean, a lot of this was very much we're going to change everything, and it's my fault if it's wrong. And that basically meant that if you don't do what I'm asking, if we don't come up with something that you want to do that solves the problem I've shown you, then it's your fault. If we come up with something and it doesn't work, then it's my fault. And actually, it kind of de-stressed them to be a bit more imaginative about what they could do. It's kind of like, okay, I've had this idea for years. I mean, it is kind of, to some extent, the consultants. Often, as a consultant, you wander in and they go, the business says this is all horrible, and you go and talk to the developers and go, well, it's all horrible because of this. And you go back to the business and go, it's all horrible because of this, and go, that's amazing, wonderful, can you help us sort it? And the developers go, well, we knew that already, but as the consultant, you're going in and you kind of go, well, if I'm wrong, get rid of me. And it's that kind of thing. And if it all goes pear-shaped, it's my fault, and I'm gone.
I think
it's something I was going to bring out a bit later on, but the thing that really gets me is the kind of, so if everybody working on completely separate things, all hammering at the testers, everything arriving at the same time is the wrong thing to do, but you're still doing it. It's like, well, the business won't like it. It's kind of like the business need value. Just because they want to see you busy doesn't mean they're getting any value. And I'm here to tell the business that what they're asking you to do is pointless. Well, it was interesting. What we did do is functionally align all of that 3 years worth of code, so it went through testing quicker. So it's basically, there were 100 or so things, and I kind of went, okay, work out which area of all of the different systems they are in, and just batch them up. So we get a bonanza of features coming through in this particular part, so the testing is less painful, and getting it through and out.
If you're only allowed a day a week, how do you, so obviously it's quite a big cultural change.
Yep.
If you're there on a Monday, why it's sort of Tuesday to Friday when you're not there? You're back in just to
Yeah.
a little course correction or a nudge or
So
all the good work.
So the way I actually did it is I was able to be reasonably flexible, and they were okay about being flexible. So actually, I did sort of 2 days a week for the first month to sort of hammer around everybody, and then come up with the big plan. And then it was kind of once a fortnight, just on the course correction side of things. So that was the kind of the way it started. Interestingly, I don't know if I'll get to this. In the middle, they've basically gone, we're just too busy. We're not going to change anything right now. And I've been going, fair enough. Call me when I can help. So actually, the process, I'm doing spoilers. So the other thing that I noticed very much there were the seniors, and then there was the rest. And the seniors took responsibility for stuff, and the juniors basically just went, it's their problem. I'll merge stuff in, but actually I won't do proper integration and all that kind of stuff. And I actually banned the seniors saying we need a senior developer on this. In all of the communications they did, it was actually in all of the senior developers' objectives that they stopped using that terminology. I'm amazed I managed to get this through. I don't know. I kind of asked them to do it, and they kind of went, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, because they had created a self-fulfilling prophecy that basically the less experienced people kind of didn't take responsibility, and the more experienced people kind of went, well, I'm not going to do anything on this project because we're going to need a senior on this. And it's kind of like, we're now talking about people who are experienced in this area, and I expect people to become experienced in this area because you're going to be pairing. So actually these things are going to change. And through this, and it's worked to some extent, it hasn't worked completely, of basically people taking responsibility for their code, for their mergers, making sure that things like database upgrade scripts and all that kind of stuff work, rather than just the kind of, there is a new schema and actually the upgrade script's someone else's problem. It's actually one of the things I've really kind of tried to focus on. And some of the developers are good and some of them aren't in that respect, but they... Yes. Yes. Yep, definitely. And that's one of the things I saw there to start with. It was kind of like, there's a build manager and it's all his problem. It's kind of, not anymore. He's not allowed to do any builds for the next month. Someone else has got to do it. It's kind of like, woo, that's really bad. It's like, yes, if you think that's really bad, then they've got a big problem and you need to sort it. Okay, cool. How much longer have I got?
Well, Peter's not here, so carry on.
Okay, cool. Cool. So yes, repeat. the one thing I did have to do is keep on repeating this stuff. So people, you've got to say what's really going on. It's kind of like, well, they don't want to know. You've got to say what's really going on. They won't like it. You've really got to say what's really going on. The business, yeah, it's the business value. It's not the stories coded. I just had to keep on repeating that. It's kind of like it's just the way we've already done it. Stop, stop, stop. So, did it work? This is the honesty side of things. So the wins. The them and us went, as I mentioned, really. That scheduling meeting completely ditched the them and us, which was brilliant. The respect from the development team really went up. So that they really, this kind of the irritating people we love to kick was, it really massively reduced. There was a lot more respect for the development team. The development team empathy is growing. Some of them really don't care. I'm just really trying to get them to care, but most of them care. But yeah, so the empathy with the rest of the business is definitely growing. Code Complete, pretty much a thing of the past. There is this one system that was awesome, but is now rubbish because it's just the whole world has moved on, which is sad, but yeah, they've pretty much got rid of all of that backlog. Yeah, very much the mock-ups I mentioned is pretty much standard now. Time to deliver improved, as I say, kind of down to about 3 weeks from well over a month and sometimes 3 months. One of the things that was really pleasing, they had, as I say, in the middle of this period, they were properly under pressure. They had a very big deal happen to them, and the business sponsor went every single day at 4:30 to the development team to find out what was going on and to adjust if needed, because if they didn't hit that deadline, it would have been massive for the company, and they hit the deadline. And they didn't, the rest of the world didn't fall apart, but it was basically, okay, for this period, we're really going to be pushing here, and business as usual is really going to have to suffer. This project needs to be out of the door. And the business owner that I was talking to loved it, absolutely loved it. Felt so much more comfortable being in the meetings with the other side of the negotiations and all that kind of stuff, because he really felt that what was going to be done, he knew what was going to happen on time. He was really certain about that. So he was, yeah, as I say, that was massively pleasing. The struggle continues though. I did have losses when I did this first time around, but actually, so the business has really squeezed out the professional development and the process improvements at the moment. So I haven't got nearly as much. The way the business operates has changed massively, and that's brilliant, but actually the technical side of things, they really haven't been able to embrace, because over this period they have had 3 or so really massive things happen to them outside of their control. You know, someone coming along and going, we're going to give you a lot of money if you do this change for us, and them going, yeah, okay, we'll do that then. So it's fair enough. But I haven't given up on that. But it hasn't happened nearly as well as I'd hoped. The confidence to be open and honest, it's this whole Google thing of psychological safety and all of that kind of stuff. You really have to keep banging on about this. It's kind of like, we really need you to be honest about all of these things. It's kind of like, well, the business really, we've just started putting a few things onto the Kanban board that are tech debt. We're just not bothered telling the business. It's like, no, everything. And it's kind of like, okay, you mean everything then? Yes, I really mean everything.
Even though it's still a bit of a problem, is it improved?
Oh yeah, massively. The things going pear-shaped, the business know. As I say, the bit they haven't been entirely honest is kind of like, oh, this thing's a bit awkward, and on this tech debt, I really want to have that sorted. They were still doing that. That wasn't great, but if things go pear-shaped, they know about it. The retrospectives, as I mentioned, aren't nearly as often as I'd hoped. And they're still tempted. Even this last week when I went in, they kind of went, we've kind of been asked to do 8 projects at the same time, so we kind of get 8 people on it. And it's kind of like, no. you're going to go back to the business and go, which one of these is the most important? And you're going to get more people on that, so that gets out of the door. And it's kind of like, but they want all of these things. I know they want all of these things, but they tell you what order, and then you sort it. So they're still struggling a little. So conclusion: the pizzas are very close to coming. It's really, really hard, to be honest. And obviously, some people are kind of more people pleasers than others. People like me who really don't care what people think about them. Well, I probably do, but actually, I don't. I enjoy being honest, and I enjoy that kind of, everything's going pear-shaped kind of moment when there's a tumbleweed, sort of. Whereas other people really, really shy away from that. So you've really got to support those people who are not wanting to be giving the bad news. You've really got to support them a lot because it makes us vulnerable. The business backing was crucial. Without it, it would have been dead in the water. Changing habits is hard. So again, they wanted to revert back. And it's kind of like, no, keep going. Do you believe it's right? Yes, I believe it's right, but I don't believe the business believes it right. Well, that's my problem. You keep doing the right thing and I'll take the flak. Trust has to be earned. So actually doing things like, this deadline was a real deadline and it really did get shipped and we really are getting money from it now. That kind of thing has to happen. But the big thing is, I still believe, and this is how I sold it, truth is the best basis to make any decision for a business. Working on they said it was going to, but actually I really don't believe them. It's just awful. It's awful. Truth is the best thing. So can you be too honest? Free of deceit, truthful and sincere. I really don't think that is a bad thing. I really think it is good. Sometimes tact is required. Sometimes I fail there. And sometimes sort of a bit of planning and how you're going to deliver the message is a good idea. But I don't think you can be too honest. Thank you very much. Wow, an hour.
So we've got a few minutes for questions. If anybody's, I know we've had a lot already, but I've got time for a few more.
Yep.
We were talking about encouraging developers to take part in testing as well.
Yeah.
So why do you not encourage testers to take part in development?
I do. The testers got so fed up that actually they started writing utilities for themselves to help them do testing, and actually those utilities have now gone back to the developers for them to be able to set up test environments for themselves to do coding. So actually I'm very, very big advocate of getting the testers to do some degree of coding. The testers in this context probably don't have the kind of background to be able to do stuff that would be going out to be shipped, but actually to do systems programming that is useful utility-wise was brilliant. As I say, it's been good, and it's actually been kind of pushed back to the developers, and it's something that they're being expected to use. I'm not saying they're being forced to use it, but they're being expected to use it. So, very much so.
The workflow process of going through getting working in t-shirt sizes, do you foresee there being a huge point where they can go back to you if we need to do ROI investment, investigations, etc., feed that into some sort of system so that when they turn up to their business meeting, they're literally just going to write the number at the end of this says it's 0.5, or this is point A, and this is point 7. Therefore, do we agree with this order that the system is telling us before they start having the discussions and the haggling?
Well, the one thing that has happened is previously it was basically everything was thrown into development to do a lot of the kind of just working out whether it was a good idea or not. Whereas actually now the marketing team have things like Balsamic, they've got a little bit of tech ability so they can create happy path demos and all of that kind of stuff. So actually they are actually working out whether it's a good idea even before it goes anywhere near development. And actually they're giving development a happy path, CSS and JavaScript prototype of what they want in certain situations, or balsamic demos and all that kind of thing. So actually, a lot of stuff is being done sometimes before and sometimes in parallel. So some projects are actually hammering forward, but it's kind of like, okay, you start on the infrastructure. We know what needs to be done. We know what the back end is going to look like. The front end we haven't worked out yet, but actually we know we need to be out of the door by the end of the year. So you start on your bit, and we'll be giving you stuff in time for you to make the real code. So actually, they've actually started working far better in parallel with the rest of the business, because there's now more of a faith that the development team will deliver when they need it.
It was interesting, on your slides at the beginning, you were saying you have trust and all this. You just said the word faith, and it felt like that should be on that slide as well, because trust is one part of that, but actually faith in what the business is going to do, what it's going to deliver. Faith is in numbers, so those in the fluffy website world, faith in the NFRs, the
Yep.
test requirements, and not going sitting there in meetings with entity comments going, yes, we're going to get 20,000 users. Just pre-random for a reason. Not 1,000 as it was. It came out and I think that number didn't it? Yeah, same meeting. Of going, actually, the faith and the answer to be back from the business going, yes, we trust it.
Yes, I mean, I think this is still a work in progress, and I mean, it is interesting. There's now the genuine understanding that there are certain systems the company has which are absolutely appalling. The NFRs are just so bad that the developers have been able to say, you've got your choices. We do nothing and it's rubbish. We shoot it in the head, or you do something with it. And the business has gone, we completely understand, we completely agree. At the moment, we're going to do nothing, but we do promise to make a decision, and we're not going to get you to do anything on it, because at the moment, it's not making us enough money. So they have a wonderful quadrant, and there's the dogs, and there's a few things in the dogs, and it's kind of like, we promised that we were not going to put anything into the dogs area unless we're going to invest in it.
Do you think you would have revised your plan if you were a permanent role and not a fixed contract? Not so aggressive and setting smaller expectations in case.
I think the thing is that I'm afraid that's a difficult question for me to answer, because I've always been really awkward. I worked for this guy who was autistic, and he kind of set me in a particular mold of being a bit bolshy and a bit kind of awkward. So I've always been that kind of way, and I think it's to some extent your character as to whether you're prepared to be. I mean, I've been doing consultancy for 15 years, and my permanent expectation is to make myself redundant. I'm in there to do a job to make sure they're able to take over. So I don't think I can answer that one easily. I have a boredom threshold issue, which is why I do what I do. I like going into the hair on fire, people running around screaming, and getting it to the state where everyone's looking calm and happy, and then at that point it's boring and I leave. So
obviously a lot of these ideas are attractive, but also keeping the job is attractive.
Yes,
so
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
what do you pick and choose from this to take away, or do you just go for it? That's where my mind is at the moment.
I mean, I think the thing I would go for, which I think is a really, really safe bet, is that the truth is the best for decisions, but you need to make sure that people have got the psychological safety. It's kind of like, you can't get us to do that until we don't think we're going to. Have I just done something to that? We can't until you tell us that if. Until you tell us that we're not going to get fired for telling the truth, you're not going to get that. But when you get that, it's going to change the world.
Thank you.
You said on there about business backing is crucial.
Yeah.
Something I'm trying to encourage with business product owners, etc., is bringing teams along the journey and getting their engagement and faith in what we're doing, because I think that's in everyone's interests.
Yes.
especially as a lot of people we sit in IT are shareholders and
Yep.
have a very vested interest in the company doing very well.
Yep.
So we try to remove the them and us
Yep.
by saying we can mean by the business.
Yep.
Because this is our business.
Yeah, I mean, the language I used here was to point out that there was at the beginning a very stark contrast, and there was a very big them and us. And there is to some extent, but just because of that scheduling meeting it's no longer the business, it's no longer the developers being the ones who pick stuff. It's kind of, this is the thing that we think is going to give the business value next. And actually the developers kind of going, yeah, okay, I can get behind this. I feel this is important. And it has really, really changed. The majority of people, I mean, the business has gone for it 100%. As I say, some of the developers are still a bit, just head down, focused on their little bit and don't care. But actually, the business has really, really sort of embraced it, and it's no longer feeling like the them and us. It's now feeling like these are my people to get my stuff done for me and for my customers. And whenever there's that difficult situation where I need my stuff done, it's kind of like, well, you go back to your meeting and you get your thing to the top of the pile and we'll do it for you. I mean, a really, really nice thing happened. I don't know if it was this week or it was the week before, but it was kind of like, here's one of these dogs, and actually there's another team going to start working on some part of this that this dog relies on. Do you want this as an excuse to sort of work on that dog? I don't care, it's a business decision. If you tell me that's sufficiently important, I'll work on it. But actually, it's the business decision. I'm 100% sold on doing the stuff that makes this company money. The stuff about they're not doing the professional development, they still see that I'm around and I'm going to do the professional development. So therefore, they haven't felt like this is a promise that's never going to get delivered. It's kind of like they're in charge of my days. They know how many days they have left to spend on me, and that's why they basically go, don't come back until we've got some time to spend on you. So they feel that they've got this thing in the bank that they know they've got to spend on the professional development and on the process improvement. So they still feel that they've got something, that the business has given them this thing, and the business hasn't taken it away. They've just said, sorry guys, we're really busy. We need to get this stuff done first. And they've gone, fair enough, we'll do that. And they just expect that they will get their time in the end to improve things, because the business know that it will mean they'll get stuff even faster. So they feel that has happened.
Right.
Here.
So thank you very much again, Peter. That was really good. Thank you.